Hello and welcome back to another episode of Fully Books, the Hidden Gems author podcast, in which Craig Touch and myself, Roland Hume, chat some of the interesting figures and leading lights of this crazy industry arena of writing and self-publishing. And today I'm delighted to have a very special guest join us, Gary Smith, who is the author of a brilliant series of books about Warren Steelgrave, and he is here to talk to us all about visual storytelling. Gary, how are you doing today?
I'm great today. Yeah, it's a beautiful day here in California, and it's nice to have the warm weather back. So
Well,
everything's
be careful what you wish for. I know summer's going to be right on top of us anytime soon.
well. Yeah, I'll be heading back to Italy in 2 weeks, so I won't. I'm not going to worry too much about it. The weather here.
Well, we are very grateful for you joining us. And of course, we wouldn't be here without the man himself, Craig Touch, the owner and founder of Hidden Gems and an author himself. How are you doing today, Craig?
Doing great. Thanks, Roland, and thanks for joining us, Gary. Yeah. I mean, so for those unfamiliar, you write the Warren Steelgrave series of mystery thrillers, I believe, and those, are books that I think you're well known for writing books that read like a movie, and people seem to be able to visualize in their minds very clearly what is happening in your books, and so that you're an expert at sort of that visual storytelling. So that's the sort of thing we want to focus on today. But why don't you give us a little, information background about yourself and how you got started in all this, and how you became to be such a great visual storyteller, and we'll go from there.
Well, I have had a very eclectic life. I was the first. I was supposed to be the first to go to college in our family, and I chose not to. It was my first major decision as a high school student, and one I have never regretted. I started my working life as a laborer alongside other laborers. Soon got a craft as an electrician. Some years later, started a small business and turned it into a multi-million-dollar electrical contracting business across the United States. In the course of doing these large jobs, there was a lot of litigation, so spent a lot of time in federal court and state court. And as Shelby Foote said, that's where you learn dialogue. He's out in the workplace and not in a classroom. And so I have a deep wealth of characters and situations over the years that I draw from for my stories. And I think that's why they seem so believable to most people, because they kind of are. They weren't. They're based on situations and stuff in real life.
They're set in Italy, aren't they?
Well, Italy and the States. I went to Italy looking for family, and unbeknownst to me, I found them. In a small village, and that's only 188 people, just at the base of the Alps. And so I went home and sold my business and went to school to learn Italian. And it was in that process that I found out how much I love to write. We had to do essays. We had to towards the advanced classes, something that was taken out of an Italian paper. Couldn't be politics. It couldn't be sports. It had to be, something you couldn't get off of TV or something. And we had to write the first half of the essay as a way of seeing that we could read and understand the Italian. And the second half we could free write. Well, being that I was every summer spending summer in Italy, I would pick something out of the small local newspaper, and something that I was involved with, or my cousin might be involved with, and so I found out I just loved to do the free write. We had to do at least 4 papers, one we could throw away, and I found I just did all 4. So that's when I decided I would write the first book in the series, just to see if I had a voice. I mean, I hadn't been to college, I hadn't had any formal training for writing at all, other than the few classes I had to take to get my Italian degree. And so I found myself writing the first book, and very naive, had no idea how the things were supposed to be double spaced. I thought, I thought, I thought, I thought some proofreader or editor would correct all the mistakes, and I found out, well, no, that's not always the case. And but the first book was people liked, and they it was supposed to be a one-off, but they wanted to know what happened to this couple. They wanted the story to continue. So that led to the second book, and then the third book, and then the fourth book.
And you're up to 10 now.
Yeah, I'm writing the 10th one right now. I'm about halfway through the 10th book, my 11th book, but the 10th book. Along the way, I was getting a little tired of the series, and so I decided to do a book of short stories. Little did I know what a challenge that would be. I mean, most writers they'll put together a collection of their short stories from what they've written over the years. But to sit down and do 20, 28, 29 short stories in 8 months was a bit of a challenge, because you're changing themes, you're changing characters, so.
I mean, that's a lot. And short stories, in some ways, almost take more discipline than a full-length story, because you've got...
Some of the stories are short stories, 1,200 to maybe 2,000 words. One or two of them are longer, maybe almost close to a novella, but not quite, maybe 20,000 words. And so yeah, it was a challenge. You're writing about a house that's haunted. The next one is a murder mystery. The next one's a love story. So you're kind of all over the place. And some are written taking place in the United States. Some are in Italy, some in France, and so you're changing. Your mind is changing all the time. To get out of one genre and take a day's rest, and say, well, what shall we write about today? That's entirely different. So very challenging.
And so tell me about visual storytelling. And I'm quite interested to see visual storytelling in the context of a full-length novel, like your Warren Steelgrave ones, and then visual storytelling in a shorter story where you don't necessarily have the word count to be able to build it out the same way.
Yeah, that was never planned. I'm dyslexic, so my chapters are short. They're only like 1,200 words or so, and people love that. They read like a movie, they say, and that's because I don't. A lot of authors, will plot out the whole novel, or they have difficulty with novels because they can't see the whole book. But I just start with the first chapter, and towards the end of the chapter, it ends, and the next chapter folds into it, and each chapter ends up being almost like a scene in a movie. So at some point, usually around the second or third chapter, my characters take over.
Yeah.
And I sit down and they're telling me where they're going, what they're doing, and it's almost like I sit down every day to see the next chapter in their life, what they're going to do. I'll sit down with maybe an idea, and characters aren't going to do that. I get through the first paragraph. And they said, no, we're going to France. We're not going to England, so it just starts to unfold like a story in chapters. So,
well, as an Englishman, I would much rather go to France as well.
So you, when you start a new book, you don't have any idea about the plot, or do you have sort of an overall idea, but you're not actually plotting out chapter by chapter ahead of time?
Yeah, one or two I had something that was gnawing at me. The second book, was it the second book? No, the third book. For a long time, I thought how fun it would be to have a serial killer come to town and meet up and date another serial killer and neither one know what they're up to, so and so I always had that idea. And after the second book, my main character decides to, because he's an aging writer, got into writing by just chance, and so he doesn't really consider himself a writer, and he thought he could improve his skills by going to this small town where there was a serial killer. So that kind of fit into that, and it ended up being a story about the main serial killer is a police chief. It's a woman police chief, and the book starts off, she's upset watching the news because there's been another girl found nude along the road, and she's upset that somebody's hunting in her territory, and that's kind of how it starts out, and then progresses on.
Isn't that because I always think, if you're a serial killer and you're dating, surely like one of the advantages of being a serial killer dating is what are the chances of the person you're dating being a serial killer as well?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, and so I had thought about that's probably in the series. That's probably the only one that I always thought would be a good movie or concept before I started writing. I thought about the unusualness about that. And when I was studying Italian, we had to take an English class, and there was a book we read called the four, what was it, the four equations, I think it was, by Don Luis. And one of those is how you're never happy. We're always searching for happiness. We cannot be happy because we've been domesticated from the time of our birth. Our church, parents, everybody has been molding us how we should be. And that the main killer, the detective who's a killer in this book, she considers herself a non-domesticated, fully non-domesticated. And so, unlike other serial killers that, she laughs at the FBI because they've always just put their profile together from idiots that were caught. And that non-domesticated don't have the tags, don't have the patterns, don't have, that she explains it this way. We all accept killing to sustain life. We kill beef for beef, we kill plants, but an undomesticated also knows that you have to kill for your soul, to feed your soul. And so there's never no pattern, right? There's no all blonde girl. It doesn't matter. You just need to go out and kill somebody sometime. And so she feels they would never be caught. And in researching the book, I was surprised that there was like over 100,000 people that just disappeared, that nobody knows what happened to them.
100,000 people. Is that every?
That was right off of when I was doing the book. I researched how many people are missing, and there's always about 100,000 people that, for some reason, have just disappeared. And so that kind of fit into the book. And then another thing that happened is I picked up some stalker on. Maybe I shouldn't be saying this, but I picked up some stalker on Facebook. And that was I had to start a file from the email. That was getting a little scary,
Were they Italian or American?
Well, who knows, right? I researched the best I could, and it's a church-going woman in the southern part of the United States, and then it was my daughter says, "You don't know that." It might be, it could be your neighbor, it could be anybody, and that was
That's true.
She gets written into the book. I mean, I didn't have to. I mean, Hemingway said, "You can't write a good story unless you've experienced it," right? So about halfway through that book, I didn't have to think too hard on how these things progress from being a fan, that you're proud, I've got another fan. They start escalating the word. They're starting to get a little scary, and so in the book, his love life, who's on tour, has a stalker, picks up a stalker that creeping around in her house at night. So she comes back to this small town where he's at, and that's how it progresses from there. So that's probably the only book that I had thought about what an interesting situation that would be before I started writing.
I mean, that's always a good approach to take, isn't it? Because if it's an intriguing concept, then it hooks people in before they've even read a single word.
Well, yeah. I think a lot of people enjoy that. Although it seems like some of the others have been, some of them have been the most favorite. I think this one kind of creeps some people out. Undomesticated, the book Undomesticated kind of creeps some people out, because it was the way she's depicted in there. You can identify and almost like the character, right? And so people started identifying kind of,
That's kind of a good thing, though.
How much of that character is in me, and so
that's what makes a book really compelling, though, when you think about it. It's like, it's all sorts of books. I think when you see your darkness in the dark character, then that kind of makes it very real.
Yeah, no, I agree, and so most throughout the series, Warren Stilgrave, the protagonist, is always dealing with something personal that's kind of hidden under the story. It's kind of a lot of people love the story, but they don't pick up on that underlying kind of theme. But yet, I'll get emails from somebody, and will say, "Wow, they give me a new perspective on something I'm dealing with, a breakup or, having to come to grips with planning a murder or somebody, when you never thought you would ever be in that kind of a situation.
Right.
And now you're actively plotting to kill somebody, protect your family.
So what kind of things are you doing to try to paint that picture? I know a lot of it is, I know you try to work your real world locations in to make things immersive. Are you always using locations you've been to so that you can really paint that picture?
Absolutely. My daughter, when she come to visit in Italy, walked in the house and said, "I know where everything in this house is." I feel like I've just stepped into the first chapter. And my house, you can kind of see in the background of my writing studio in the back. My house in Italy, it was built in the year 1500.
Oh, wow.
And so it's got a presence. It's got a ghost or a presence. Where people thought I was kind of making that up until I was in America, and I have a camera to keep an eye on the front of the house, and my phone went off in the middle of the night, and picked it. I mean, the camera picked it. Yeah, and I'd seen somebody was on the porch, and so when I turned on the camera, it picked it up coming out of the house and floating around. And
that's crazy. So you had it on camera?
Yeah, so I've got it on camera, and so. But and it leaves me little messages sometimes when I'm getting ready to travel back to the States. It'll start stopping the clock every night at 2:00 in the morning. And or it'll move something that I have in a special place. It'll take it and move it to another place, just as a way of saying goodbye. So I'm there a lot by myself, 2 or 3 months at a time, and so it's kind of nice to have someone to share the evening with.
I mean, that's a concept right there in itself.
Yeah, you have something to talk to while you're finishing a bottle of wine. So yeah. So most every place I've been, and having been a photographer in a past life, an award-winning photographer in the past life, I studied a little bit with Ansel Adams.
Oh wow, Ansel Adams is amazing.
Yeah, that was amazing for me, and so it has my book covers are all my photographs, and throughout the book, I put in a few photographs to help set the scene. Somebody, you're describing the scene going into the Galleria in Milano, and it's hard to describe. Well, at least I've been told that with the picture of somebody walking into the gallery, that it really brings it to life, and they feel that they've been there now, and the story makes more sense.
And that's part of the fun of reading books. I like, Dan Brown's book, the Da Vinci Code. It starts off with him giving a lecture at the American University of Paris, and to me, that's exciting because I used to work at the American University of Paris. So, like I love reading books, especially when they're exotic locations that maybe you actually have been to or familiar with. It gives it's kind of it gives you an immediate connection to the story. I think that otherwise you don't always have.
Yeah, and I think it does a couple things. Like, to your point, I've heard some people say, I know where this store is in Hayward, California, or I grew up in that neighborhood because I'm at that point there in the States, and we're writing about running from somebody in San Francisco or whatever, and people tend to love that. And also when I'm in Italy, it keeps me grounded because I am a foreigner there. My Italian's not that well, and then to go down and struggle to have the oil changed in the car and pay the taxes and renew my visa with thousands and thousands of other immigrants from all over the world, kind of keeps you kind of humble to because I do write in English, and so I think some of that is in the stories, and some of my readers get a sense of what it would be like to be in Italy as an American.
Now, you have also translated some of your books, haven't you?
I first three I translated in Italian, and then I won't do that no more. I'm not comfortable because my Italian's not. I mean, if you try to translate something in Italian to English, you'll realize how hard that is. My cousin's over there is a writer, so I got the bright idea I was going to take one of her children's books, a very small story, and translate it for my children in English. Well, this is a very small story, maybe 10, 20 pages, right? About a month later, my wife asked me, how's the story? And I said, well, it's her story written by me. It's nowhere close to the story because there's phrases in there she used in Italian that we don't have in English. And so
yes,
so the subtlety, you'll get the story, but the things that make her story great, the subtleties, the little things, don't translate. And I'm sure it's the other. First, an example would be my first book, The Willing. When I went back to Italy, I brought it to a very famous restaurant, the Tre Ray, and presented it to the owner. He's elderly. He was raised in England, graduated from Oxford, even though he was Italian. Spent a lot of time in France and a lot of time in South Africa. So his English is very, very good. Yeah, very good. And when I give him the book, first thing he comes up to the table and says, "Excuse me, I don't want to interrupt your lunch, but I don't understand the title, The Willing." So,
oh, well, there we go. If you can't understand the title, that immediately, right before you even open the book, that presents some challenges.
And so you start wondering, do they really understand your writing? They like the story, it's a great story, and they'll compliment me on it. But in the back of my mind, I'm wondering, is it really the story I wrote? Or, the subtleties of it, because, it's written from an American perspective. And so I'm not doing that, because I just don't feel that I'm comfortable with my writing being interpreted in such a way that I'm not even sure how it's being interpreted. You know.
Well, I mean, that is a challenge because I mean, I spent many years living in France, and like even now, my French is not good enough where my French is good enough that I'm aware of how my French isn't good enough to be able to like properly edit or review a book that was written in a different language.
Yeah, exactly. And see, I have a cousin. This funny story. I hope she doesn't see this.
We'll email it to her afterwards.
She's the top executive for Fiat, and
Yeah.
she spent 2 years in the States as a young girl at the university in northern in northern New York, and so she speaks English every day for the last 28 years, right? Speaking to her clients in Detroit and engineers and what all, right? And yet, I thought she would be the perfect person because she reads all my books in English, loves them. I thought, well, she can interpret it whether it's being communicated properly. But then as you start realizing, even if all that some of the phrases she uses in English and stuff make you laugh, right? And then you start wondering, even with her, how much of the book, when she says, no, they did a very good job translating it, but you don't know what that really, I don't know what that really means, you know. So.
And also in terms of the visual storytelling, I mean, it's different. I mean, that's one of the things. A visual storytelling is you want to paint a picture with words, and often in English you can do that with some very strategic words. One of my favorite writers is Ian Fleming, and with a few words he can paint an amazing picture because they're always the exact right words. But then when you're writing in a different language or having something translated into a different language, those words don't necessarily mean the same thing.
Absolutely.
It's difficult enough in English.
And so I just, they keep asking for more books in Italian, especially in the village and that I think, well, that's not going to happen.
I think
a million books. I don't know whose book would be selling, right?
Yeah, I mean, even if when you get someone else to translate your book, especially if you don't really know the language, you really have to trust that they're sort of conveying the right feeling, the right mood, they're using the right words, even though they can use different words to tell the story, but are they still capturing what makes it your book, especially if you're maybe a visual storyteller, and then when they do their translation they lose a lot of that. Then and if you don't speak the language well enough, you never even know.
Well, no, and even like my cousin who speaks English for 28 years and formal and everything, the word she'll choose in English, and the other day she says, can you come down and help me move the library? Well, I knew she meant the bookcase. Okay? So you kind of, you start getting hints that, you're not really sure. And I don't think as a second language you'd ever be able to speak it well enough to really understand the nuances that you were trying to commit to in a scene, that you were trying to paint in a scene. I don't think you could ever truly trust that. That's just my own opinion, but it was enough that I don't. Long way to your answer to your question. Yeah, I don't translate books no more.
Now, I was going to. What inspirations did you have? What sort of books did you enjoy growing up, and when you developed your love of reading? And are those things that have translated into the choice of books that you've written now?
Well, of course, and it was funny because like I mentioned before, I'm dyslexic, so I never really thought of myself as a reader. There's always somebody that hated to read. Didn't go to college because they didn't want to do no English classes, but then as people started asking me, I started thinking back, and it's like, well, I did read the Canterbury Tales in the 5th grade on my own. It wasn't a class assignment, or Cyrano de Bergerac around the same time.
And those aren't easy books for
No,
even
I was
adults.
going to say, Canterbury Tales is a tough read.
Yeah, no, tough, but you start. I start looking back on that, and I'm thinking, yeah, I struggled through those just out of the enjoyment of the story, And so I start looking back, and I feel like I'd always read 2 or 3 great stories. Shane, Breakfast at Tiffany's, that's a Capote book, and on and on and on. And so, yeah, they do. Every time you read a book, I think it has an influence. You guys are writers, you read a book, it's going to have an influence on what you write and your voice at some other point. And in some of these podcasts, I've been asked, the young readers that want to become writers, what's the most important thing? I said, read a lot and write what you enjoy reading. If you enjoy reading mysteries, don't think you're going to go out and write a great book on history, because you think it's important. I mean, so yeah, all those people. I think Raymond Chandler was a huge influence on me. The way he would put together a scene. And James Joyce, for the way he used the language.
I mean, talk about another book that's difficult to read. I mean, Ulysses doesn't get much more difficult, does it?
Yeah, and then of course Faulkner. He gives you such permission to forget about grammar. I mean, anybody that would write a sentence that's over 1,000 words long gives you the permission to no, just use the language how you want the language, and don't worry about commas and everything. Hemingway said, "Someone's got to tell Faulkner he's a great writer, but you can't start a chapter with a capital and end it with a period. It's a little long. It's a little long. So you'd never get away with that in English class, I guess. Talk about a run-on sentence. So yeah, all those books that I've read do have influence. I think the biggest influence would be Raymond Chandler, just the way my character resembles many of his characters.
I mean, he was a great writer because, in the same way I mentioned I like Ian Fleming, it's like Raymond Chandler was an influence on Ian Fleming because of the succinct way he'd have short sentences and use exactly the right word to be able to paint an image, which you couldn't paint as vividly even if you used a paragraph of text.
No, you can. The way he would depict a new character, with so few words, but you not only knew what they looked like, but you knew their soul. Yeah, I mean, you knew where it was like you knew the person and where they were going to go, and so that's an unusual talent. He didn't get the credit he should have in the States like he did in England. I mean, they loved him in London, but here in the States, it took many, many years close to his death before he started being recognized for his writing.
That's always the challenge, isn't it? To try and be a popular author while you're still alive.
Well, I guess, I mean, that's something I don't worry about or think about. If it's just a scratch and I got to scratch an itch, I got to scratch every day, and I don't feel right if I don't sit down and write.
I've heard that a lot. Yeah, people say that rats have those big incisor teeth, and if they don't gnaw something every day, they just keep growing, and they can literally like impale themselves with their teeth. And people are like that with writers. If you don't do something to keep writing and keep being creative, then eventually it will get you.
Absolutely. Well, and it's either I've had so many people ask me, friends, people in podcasts say, well, I've always wanted to write, and I always tell them, well, then get up and write. I mean, that's the most important part. It doesn't matter what you write. If you don't like it, you can throw it away. It can be gobbledygook. Just throw it away and write tomorrow. It's just you have to you have to satisfy that urge, and it'll come,
Yep.
that they,
And it's a skill that gets better as you do it more. So even all those pages that you don't use or that you throw out are making, the future pages that you're going to write and use better.
absolutely. And I think so many people are held up with considerations about their grammar, or will people think they're stupid, or people think they're arrogant because now they want to become a writer at some point. It's like none of that matters. What matters is personally you want to write, so you sit down and you write. Just write a paragraph every day. And this out of the satisfaction will come the story. I'm telling you, if you're worried about being a writer because you want to be famous or you want to make a lot of money, forget it. Then your stuff will never be good enough, right? That for anybody, because it's too contrived.
Yeah, I think that's a very good piece of advice for anybody. If you're not writing it for yourself, then who are you writing it for? And why would they want to read it?
Right.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So have you ever tried, since you're already writing in a way that's very visual, have you ever tried writing, screenplays or movies? Because that is sort of how those have to be written. They have to be written. Everyone who reads them has to be able to picture the scene. You're not really painting a picture. Any words you use have to be words that can be shown on the screen.
No, that's true, and I've thought about it, especially being my chapters are so short, and they're kind of almost written that way as a scene out of a movie. But I think that's another talent that I don't think I don't have the time. I think to make it and perfect that, because so much of what I write wouldn't be in the screenplay, because it would be on the film, right? It would be, if it's a scene in a room, you're gonna just mostly the dialogue and not the stuff within the room, because that's going to be being filmed, so you don't have to describe the door and the thing and whatever. And so it might, in some ways, it might be easier, but it's a different skill, I think. It's like you said, those words you do use, I think you'd have to be very good at dialogue.
Yeah.
People love my dialogue, and I love writing dialogue. I think that's where you define a character, and is his interaction with another person. So I write mostly, I think I did one book in the third person, but I mostly write first person. So the dialogue between the people are always kind of very personal, and it's almost like you're talking with that person, not being told what that person was saying to somebody.
I think that's a very interesting thing, because in books you can explore someone's thought process, what they're thinking as they're doing something, which you can't at all in movies.
Yeah, true.
Right. You have to do it through, the dialogue, through their actions in the movie, through, the way that they interact with other people. You can't have these big long pages of the thoughts that are going through their heads.
Yeah,
Unless you're writing a book that has, that narrator, but that's not
that
usually.
That would be the actor's
Right.
preview, to be able to, with a look, you'd know what he's thinking. But yeah, to take 60,000 words, a 6-hour book, and tell that story in an hour and a half film, 2-hour film, that's a talent, I think. I mean,
Yeah.
you're cutting out a whole lot of the writer's work, to tell the same story, even though a lot of it's on film. That's the easy part to cut out. But it's like you said, the other part, it's really the director and the actor.
It's funny, Craig and I.
For them to have it all in there, I think it's very, very difficult.
I think Craig and I were talking the other day about how there used to be a thing when a movie came out, you could also buy the novelization of the movie, which I guess with the influx of the internet and stuff isn't something that happens anymore. But I used to enjoy that. I'd watch a movie in the cinema and really love it, and then I'd buy the paperback book, and it would often expand in so many areas from the movie because you'd have that the room to do that in a book.
And that's why so many people will read the book, love the book, go see the movie, and be very disappointed.
Exactly.
Because in the opposite way, your favorite parts of that book aren't in that movie. Or like the direction you explained, where you see the movie and you love the movie, then you get the book and there's even more of the movie there. More of those parts.
Yeah, and they often have to change things because of the idea that so much is internalized in the book, and so they have to sort of turn it into something external, or they have to cut out things that take too long to develop, or merge characters into one. But when you're writing something visual, even if you're painting a picture, but what the person who's reading it, the picture that forms in their mind might not necessarily be what formed in your mind when you were writing it. But because those things never meet, there's never that disappointment. But you see that with film, movies that were turned into films, where you have a lot of people that are disappointed because that's not how they visualize that person looked or acted, right? But in a book, you don't have that. Even though their visualization might be very different than yours, that they'll never have that disappointment because they don't know that, right? With the movie, it's hit in the face. Like, that's not what I thought he looked like.
No, and I think also when you read a book, no matter how the writer depicted a character or whatever, you're going to filter through your own experience of life, and it might remind you of a good friend of yours or whatever. And that's when you get to move into the book with your own imagination and put a look on the character, their personality. No matter how the writer's written it, you visualizing it in your own mind. It was like when I did the first, all the books are on audio. And when the first producer of the audiobook sent me a sample of the first chapter and said, "So what do you think?" And I laughed. I said, "What do I think?" He said, "What do you think?" I said, "I've already got an award for the book and have written the book. And I have a voice and character in my mind that you're never going to be able to match. This is your performance, pal. This isn't, if they hate this audiobook, I've already got an award for the book. That's your gig, not mine." So I said, "Don't ask me what I think. You do it how you feel you need to, and leave that up to your creative self."
I think that's very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I can't.
Do the audiobooks tend to do as well for you as the written?
Well, people like them. I took me about 3 books to find a guide that I felt really did justice to the books. And it's funny because I think my book was his first ever attempt. I think he was wanting to break into like voiceovers or something like that, right? And so now after 7 or 8 books, he's got characters down, because he knows it's always the same group of gang of people in most of the books. So he's got them all pretty much down, and I enjoy him a lot. And so they think they're doing pretty well. And but a funny thing, I guess it was 2-3 months ago, there was somebody snooping around about a movie deal, right? And everybody wants to see their book go to a movie. Everybody wants it. I guess I'm the only one that don't care really. And the wife says, "You're not too excited about them asking about it." I said, "Well, it's like this. Let's say we put together a deal and I sell them the rights for $250,000. I said, that's $250,000 for 10 years work."
Yeah.
Right? And no paycheck coming next week. So let's let's be realistic about the money. And I said, the second thing is, it goes off and wins 5 Academy Awards, right? That's the screenwriter. That's the producer. That's the directors. That's the actors. That's all these other people that made that happen, not me. I said, but when I walk across that stage and they give me an international award for the book, that's all me. And that brings such satisfaction to me. I said, that's my peers saying, that's your work, right? I'm not trying to get credit for somebody else's work. So I said, yeah, it's not all that kind of movie,
I mean, that's another conversation that we were having. How the wonderful thing about writing is it enables you to create a single person can create their own world with the power of words. When you're making a movie or a TV show or anything like that, I mean, it is a purely collaborative experience, and you are only as good as the weakest link in your chain.
Yeah, and like Grisham, I think, said once, they asked him, did you see Pelican Brief or whatever?
Yes, I remember that. That was a while ago, wasn't it? But that was a great.
And he goes, no, I didn't go see it. You know why? He said, I got the money. I walk away from it. It's theirs now. It's not mine. And that's a really true story, I mean, that's
I think
it's not, once you sign that paper, it's not yours no more.
That's true, but I don't think I could sell the rights to something I wrote and then not go see what they did to it, for good or bad.
See how they trashed it up?
Yeah, I mean, even if they messed it completely, I'd still want to know about it. And then I wouldn't care as much, right? Oh, I got $250,000. What do I care? That was your mess. But if it does well, then they'll want to buy all the other books. So I mean,
very personal thing. So, but anyway, so it's writing is just in your blood, I think, and I didn't realize how much until I started writing. That for class, and thank God I find it,
Well, unfortunately,
on the golf course playing golf with a bunch of idiots, or something, instead of looking to find time every day to write.
So that sounds more enjoyable to me than the golf. Now, unfortunately, it looks like we are approaching the top of the hour. So, Gary, we've really enjoyed the conversation we've been having. Craig, before we wrap things up, do you have any final questions for Gary?
No, I think I think it's
experience for me, and you guys are great to talk to.
Yeah, well, thanks for coming on and sharing your experiences with us.
Now, before we go, Gary, where can people find out more about your books?
At www.garysmithauthor.com has all my podcasts, has all my interviews, magazine articles I've been asked to write, all my books, all the reviews of my books, and also any of your listeners that go to the website right now can download a free audiobook of my last book.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, we will be sure to pop a link down to your website down below in the description. So if you have been listening to this or watching on YouTube and have enjoyed what Gary has to say, then please scroll down there, click on that link and download your free audiobook. And while you're there, you will pass that big empty comment section. So please make sure to leave Gary a comment and let him know how much you have enjoyed everything that he shared with us today, because I know that we have. And while you're there, there's also that subscribe button, that like button, and there is a bell icon. If you click that, you'll be notified every time there is a new episode of Fully Booked. And of course, there will be a brand new episode of Fully Booked coming out next week. So until then, cheerio.